This is TNA Heavyweight Champion of the World, Magnus. Keep watching The Roman Show.
This is The Roman Show.
We're here with the TNA World Champion, Magnus. Magnus, thanks very much for speaking to us today. Tomorrow night you have a great matchup against Samoa Joe inside a steel cage. What can we anticipate knowing that you and Samoa are just phenomenal wrestlers?
I think that, anybody who's followed TNA and followed the show knows that, it's not going to be the first time Joe and I have wrestled, and, we have a long history and we have a good chemistry both as opponents and as partners, but I personally think better as opponents. And but this time I think the thing that's going to make this match different is this match in particular is going to be the most physically intense. It's going to be a much more violent match than perhaps we've seen before, because inside a cage there's with that it puts you in a different frame of mind, and there's a different feel and psychology to what you're doing, and it's going to lead to a much more violent kind of style, less technical and more kind of straight ahead, full on kind of contact stuff, and it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out, but I'm preparing for a lot of bumps and bruises and maybe a little blood.
How do you prepare for these bumps and bruises and all the physicality that goes in a match, and knowing that the next day you're going to wake up with a lot of bruises, a lot of bumps and soreness?
If you want to be on a high level in this business, you have to be prepared for that all the time. If you want to be a champion in this business, you have to be especially prepared for it. And when you're dealing with a list of opponents that include guys like Samoa Joe, you have to embrace that and want it in a weird way, not in a sadistic way or a masochistic way, but you have to look forward to that physicality and that that feeling of accomplishment. If tomorrow morning or if Monday morning I wake up and I'm still the champion and we had a great match, that will all be worth it, and I believe that will be the case.
What can you tell us about wrestlers in Europe? Some you've been keeping an eye out there. NXT, they have some Adam Navo, who's English as well, and great other talent coming from that area, the other region. And what can you tell me about the community over there?
I think Europe. I think when people sort of classify Europe as one whole kind of area, it's strange to me, but I can understand why. But I think that when you're talking about European wrestlers, we're talking predominantly about British and Irish, but there are some great talents out of Germany, and I'm sure it's only a matter of time before there are great talents emerging out of other areas like France or Spain or anywhere like that. And I think that the main thing that, as far as Brit wrestlers are concerned, I think is we get it ingrained in us from an early age, or from when we get started in the business, about holds and counter holds and mat wrestling, because mainly when we work in much smaller rings normally, so it's that keeping work tight and keeping things neat and everything else, and it helps your footwork and that kind of thing. So normally you can kind of tell the difference, and you can see it in guys who not necessarily were trained there, but from Americans who have come over and worked for an extended period. Like Eddie Edwards came over and worked for All Star for a long time. And even in the other company, you see Daniel Bryan, like he had he worked for All Star, who I came up with and broke in with, he worked there for a prolonged period as well, and you can see that. I can see it when I watch other people's work. I can see who's been influenced or has worked with that kind of stuff, and I think that's the main difference. But I think when you can blend it with the pacing and the kind of attitude of American wrestling is when you get, is nowadays I think everybody has to be a kind of mesh of everything. So,
what do you think it's been holding back some of the British from exploding, from having that explosion in professional wrestling?
I think it's kind of down to sort of almost my generation. We were huge wrestling fans, but the difference is that in the sort of generations before us were still brought up on. There was a British scene on television, but by the time I came up, we were raised purely on American wrestling. So what we've done is we've been trained by guys who had that roots in the traditional British wrestling, but we meshed it and blended it with the desire to be kind of sports entertainers on the American scene. So that's why I think you've seen like this crop of guys from my generation or the generation before me who have transcended well, who have transitioned well to the US, because we've got more understanding of the flair and the sport and the showmanship, and that's what I always loved about wrestling. That's what I wanted to do, I wanted to be bright lights, big city. So
this is The Roman Show.